Well, let me just give you a little bit of background on myself and tell you how it is I came to do some of the things that I've done. This lecture is not so much about the Ku Klux Klan as it is about communication. And I'm going to use the Klan as someone with whom I have communicated just to show you two extremes: a black person and Klan members, Klan leaders, Klan members, neo-Nazis, etc. I'm 59 years old, and I graduated from Howard University in Washington, D.C. with my degree in music. But as a kid, my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so I spent a lot of time overseas and living over there, traveling over there. You get assigned to a country for 2 years, and you come back home here to the States. You're here for a couple months, maybe even a year, and then you get reassigned to another country for 2 years, and then back here. So between traveling as a kid with my folks and traveling as an adult, now as a professional musician touring all over the country, all over the world, combining those travels, I have been in a total of 53 different countries on 6 continents. So I've literally been exposed to a multitude of different cultures, ethnicities, religions, you name it. I've seen a lot of it, and all of that has helped shape who I've become. Now, when I was overseas as a kid in elementary school, I attended international schools. So my classes were filled with Italians, Russians, Germans, Japanese, Nigerians, French. Whoever had an embassy in those countries, all the kids, we all went to the same school. That's how I grew up in the early 1960s in elementary school overseas. But at the end of, now, while I was being what you would call multicultural, that term did not even exist in the 1960s. It's still a relatively new term, because I remember when it was multi-cultural. Now it's just one word, all right? If you were to look into my classroom back then, you would say, oh, that looks like a little United Nations of little kids or something like that. But at the same time that I was being multicultural, my peers back home here in my own country were either going to newly integrated or still segregated schools. And there was not the amount of diversity in the classroom that I had overseas. When I would come back, I would be in either all black schools or black and white schools. So that scenario of people from all over the world, every ethnicity being in the classroom, had about 12 to 15 years before it would arrive here in our country. Today, you go into a city school and look in the classroom, it's just like it was for me overseas in the 1960s. But I didn't have that when I was coming up in school over here in my own country. So I was literally living in the future. So now, my first incident with racism, we had just come back, 1967, and in the fall, and I was 10 years old, and then it rolled into 1968. I was in 4th grade, and we went to a place called Belmont, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. And I was one of 2 black kids in the entire school, myself in 4th grade, and there was a little black girl in 2nd grade. So I really didn't see a whole lot of her because, being a big bad upperclassman, I didn't associate with 2nd graders, right? So most of my friends, were 4th and 5th graders. Yeah, I'd see her at recess and stuff, but most of my friends were 4th and 5th graders. So of course, they all were white. I'm the only black guy in the entire school. So a lot of my friends, my guy friends, were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join the Scouts, 1968. I joined the Cub Scouts. We had a parade from Lexington to Concord, Massachusetts, to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. And my den mother let me carry the American flag in this parade. It was the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Brownies, the 4-H Club, and some other organizations, all in this parade, celebrating Paul Revere's ride. So now the streets are blocked off for the parade. Both sides on the sidewalks are lined up and down with predominantly white people, and they're waving and cheering flags and so forth and so on. And as I'm walking with my fellow scouts of my troop, with my flag, somewhere down this parade route, I began getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and rocks. There was a small group of white people inside this larger group over here to my right that were throwing things. And I don't remember exactly how many there were, but I remember there being at least a couple kids and a couple adults, maybe 4 or 5 total in this small group. And me being naive and having never experienced anything like that, my first thinking was, those people don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. I did not realize that I was the only Scout getting hit until my den mother, my cub master, my troop leader, pack leader, all came rushing back into the line, into the parade, and huddled over me with their bodies and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, why? Why are they hitting me? Why are they hitting me? And all they would say is, shh, move along, Daryl, move along, it'll be okay. They never answered my question. So being, age 10, I have to have answers. And because none were forthcoming, I began creating my own answers to justify this behavior. And some of the things I came up with were, well, I'm new here. I've only been here a few months. Maybe they're testing me out. I'm the new kid on the block. I had every excuse but the right excuse. So when I got home that day, my mom and dad, who were not at the march, were fixing me up with alcohol and Band-Aids, cleaning me up, and asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? I told them I did not fall down. I told them exactly what happened. For the first time in my life, my mom and dad, I'm an only child. My parents got it right the first time. So my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. My mom and dad never lied to me. If I had a problem or a question, they gave me the answer or the tools by which I could derive the answer or solve the problem on my own. They never lied to me. But on this day in 1968, for whatever reason, I knew my mother and father were lying to me. I did not believe them. I could not fathom that someone who had never laid eyes on me, someone who had never spoken to me, someone who knew absolutely nothing about me, would want to inflict pain upon me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It made no sense. And those white people over here on the sidewalk doing that did not look any different to me than my white friends overseas. My little French friends, my Swedish friends, German friends, whatever, or for that matter, my American friends back here in my own country in Belmont, my classmates or their parents, who for the most part treated me rather well. So I refused to believe my parents. Well, about a month and a half or so later, I just turned 11. On April 4th, that same year, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember it very well. Every major city, including right here where you're sitting, Philadelphia. I'm from Chicago originally, but we were in Belmont. First we lived in Boston, we moved to Belmont. Boston, Massachusetts, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, Los Angeles, New York. Every major city burned to the ground that night with riots, burning, looting, violence. The riots that you people saw in the last couple years in Ferguson, Missouri, in Baltimore, Maryland, those riots were Mickey Mouse compared to April 4th and April 5th of 1968 when King was assassinated. It was then that I realized my parents had not lied to me. They had told me the truth. That people on both sides, white and black, had some issues with the color of skin. I didn't know why, but I realized it was true. And I formed this question in my mind. The question was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And for the next 48 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. And that fall, we moved back overseas on another assignment. Once again, I was around people from all over the world, no problems. Every time I'd come home, there'd be a problem. I had a run-in 10th grade with the head of the American Nazi Party, which was formed over in Arlington, Virginia, right near where I live. I was constantly seeing this stuff, and I had to have the answer. So I went out and I bought everything I could find. There were no courses like Race 101. That doesn't even exist today. So I would go out and I would buy books on black supremacy, on white supremacy, on anti-Semitism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, trying to find that answer. I couldn't find it. Well, moving forward, I decided who better to ask, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, than ask someone who would join an organization whose whole premise was hating those who did not look like them and who did not believe as they believe. So I began seeking out members and leaders of the Ku Klux Klan. I figured, okay, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to sit these people down and talk to them and get the answer to my question. And I'm going to travel around the country, up north, down south. I live in Maryland right now. I'll start here in Maryland, go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and ask different Klan leaders this question and write this book. So that's what I began doing. Now, I'm going to tell you about, I interviewed a lot all over the country, but I'm going to tell you about one in particular, especially this evening for this lecture. This guy, his name was Roger Kelly, and I'd managed to get his name, address, and phone number from someone on the condition that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I'd gotten it. And the guy told me specifically, he said, Daryl, do not go to Roger Kelly's house. Roger Kelly will kill you. And he told me about some bar up in Frederick County, Maryland, where the Klan would hang out on Saturday nights. And if I were to go there on a Saturday night and the Klan was not out of town rallying somewhere, they'd probably be in there, or at least the Frederick chapter would be in there, and I'd probably find Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly was the Grand Dragon. Grand Dragon means state leader, governor. Imperial Wizard means national leader. So at this point in time, Mr. Kelly was the Grand Dragon for Maryland. And I went up there, and he had been there, but he wasn't there when I was there. So I failed to find him that particular evening. And I gave my secretary, who was white, I only mention that, not that it matters to me, but I gave her the phone number for him. I wanted her to call him as opposed to me. I figured, well, he might pick up in my voice that I'm black. I said, I'm not talking to you, click. And then my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. So I knew that if I had her call him, that, and I instructed her specifically, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm black. If he asks, don't lie to him. But don't allude to it, don't give him reason to ask. If he agrees to do the interview, he'll figure that out when he sees me, right? So she said, okay. So my thinking was this, if he did agree to do the interview and he knew that I was black, he might have different answers prepared for a black interviewer than he would have for a white interviewer asking the same questions, because he would have time to prepare his answers. I wanted this to be candid, spontaneous. She understood. So she called him. And sure enough, he did not ask what color I was, and he agreed to do the interview. Now, I figured as much, that he would pick up in her voice that she's white. And I knew the mentality. He would not automatically think that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Ku Klux Klan, because they did not exist. My book is the first book written on the Ku Klux Klan by a black author. There had been 2 other books written by black authors that had chapters that dealt with the Klan, but each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and the other in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face with their would-be lynchers and questioning them. That's the experience that I wanted. All the books that I have a vast library of them, have all been written by white authors. Obviously, they have easier access to the Klan and don't have to fear retribution or ramifications or whatever, or they could join the Klan undercover, get the story, get out and write about it, or an ex-Klansman, ex-Klanswoman who leaves the organization, writes their memoirs. So he agreed to meet. Well, we set it up for this motel room up in Frederick County for 5:15 on a Sunday afternoon. Mary and I got there super early and got the room. I gave Mary some money. I sent her down the hallway to get some soda pop out of the machine, put it in the ice bucket, get it cold. I wanted to be hospitable. I wanted to be able to offer Mr. Kelly, when he arrived, offer him a beverage, a cold beverage. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me. Was he going to freak out? Was he going to attack me? Would he just turn around and walk away? Or would he come in the room and do the interview? I didn't know. Now, but in any event, I want to be prepared if he did come in the room to, offer him a drink. Well, just by happenstance, the way the room is situated, if you people are in the hallway, the door is here to the motel room, you have to walk through the door, turn to your right, and the room is laid out back here where you cannot see who is in the room from the hallway until you come halfway in and turn the corner. I took the lamp table, took the lamp off, put the table over here, put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, a chair on the other side for me. And I had a little bag next to my chair. In the bag I had a cassette player, which I took out, put on the table so I could record the interview, provided he would even come in and sit down. And I had some blank cassettes in the bag. I had a copy of the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, I've read the Bible, and I've never seen that in there. So I want to be able to pull out my Bible and say, hey, here, Mr. Kelly, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right? Right on time, 5:15. Mary hops up, runs around the corner, opens the door. I'm seated back here where you could not see me from the hallway. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. Again, grand means state level. Nighthawk means bodyguard, security, in Klan terminology. So like an Imperial Nighthawk would be the bodyguard to the Imperial Wizard. So in walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military camouflage fatigues, got the Ku Klux Klan insignia right here, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center. Over here are the initials KKK, and on his beret on his head is embroidered Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here he has a semi-automatic handgun in his holster. He comes in. Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. And the Nighthawk turns the corner and sees me and just freezes. Well, Mr. Kelly did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. He slammed into his back and knocked him forward, and they stumbled and tripped and had to, regain their balance. And they're like looking all around the room, and like, I knew what was up. They're thinking they must have knocked on the wrong door, or this is an ambush. And so I knew he was having some anxiety, and I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands, and I walked forward. And I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly." I put my hand out, I said, "I'm Daryl Davis." And he shook my hand. So far, so good. The Nighthawk shook my hand. I said, come on in, have a seat." Mr. Kelly sat down, and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And before I could sit down, Mr. Kelly says to me, "Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification?" I said, "Sure." I give him my driver's license. He says, "Oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring." Well, now that had me a little concerned. I didn't want to let him know that he had unnerved me a little bit, but I didn't want him to think, oh, he's got my address, he can just come over and burn a cross in my yard, whenever he feels like it. So I wanted to make sure he understood that. And so what I said to him was, I said, "Yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live. And you live at," and I named his house number and his street. That way, I was leveling the playing field. In other words, I was implying, if you come visit me, I might come visit you. So let's just confine all this visiting to this motel room. So he nodded his head, he understood, and I did not realize it that day. It was many months down the road that I was being a little presumptuous in my hesitancy with Mr. Kelly about my address. What it turned out to be was this. Like I said, I didn't find out till many months later. One of his Klan members lived right down the road from my house. I didn't even know that. And Mr. Kelly would have to drive down my street. He lives about an hour and a half away from me. He'd have to drive down my street to get there. And so it was just pure coincidence. He recognized the street name, that was all. And so today, that same Klan member sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine for committing a hate crime. So anyway, so we got into this, into my interview with Mr. Kelly, and he would answer questions or say, I'd rather not talk about that or whatever. Nobody got rude and violent. Every now and then might get a little loud, or he might pound his fist on the table to drive home a point. Mr. Davis, the Bible says, I'd reach down, get my Bible, show me, Mr. Kelly, chapter and verse, right? So, or if my cassette ran out. Now, he did let me know that I was inferior and he was superior to me. He did not like me, but he was doing this interview. So, whenever he made some biblical reference, I'd reach down and get my Bible. Or if my tape ran out of the cassette, I'd reach down to retrieve a fresh cassette. Every time I would reach like this, the Nighthawk would reach like this. And after a while, he realized there was no threat in the bag. And I went in and out of the bag, no problem. He didn't move, he relaxed. A little over an hour into this interview, there was kind of a strange noise, and we all jumped. And I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. I didn't make it, so he had to have made it. But I didn't know what the noise was. I'd never heard a noise like that, so I couldn't explain it. So automatically I assumed it to be a threatening noise, an ominous noise. And almost instantly I popped up out of my chair, I slammed my hands on the table, because he's sitting right here. The Nighthawk's standing right here. And my mind is racing 100 miles an hour. I'm hearing the voice that told me, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. And I'm thinking, what did I just say? What did I just do to cause Mr. Kelly to go off and make some kind of weird noise? And my eyes locked with his eyes. I had gone into what you call survival mode. And when people go into survival mode, they will do one of three things. Some people, when they fear for their life, they just tighten up and they just stand there and shake. They shake uncontrollably. You can be taking a hammer and hitting them on the head, and they will not even be deflecting the blows. They'll just be like this. That's called paralysis by fear. They're too afraid to move. I don't freeze up like that. The second thing people would do would be, when they fear for their life, they run away. That is your best option, to put as much distance between you and what you think is threatening your life, between the two of you. However, that was not an option for me, because you cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room. I was not armed. My secretary was not armed. The only person that I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk, because he had an open weapon on his hip. I did not know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up under his jacket or not. The third option is to do a preemptive strike, to mitigate the fear, to put it down, to attack it before it attacks you. And that's what I was about to do. I was about to come across that table, snatch Mr. Kelly, snatch the Nighthawk, and slam them both down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun. I feared for my life. And, it was the Nighthawk's job to protect his boss and protect himself. It was my job to protect me and my secretary. Well, when I hit the table, because I'm just thinking about, I'm going to grab this guy, grab him, and slam them, my eyes locked with Roger Kelly's eyes. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to, because my eyes were speaking loud and clear. In fact, my eyes were shouting so loud at him he could hear my eyes. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" But guess what? His eyes had locked with mine, and I could read his eyes like telepathy. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk, he's standing like this, looking back and forth between both of us like, "What did either one of y'all just do?" Right? Well, Mary, she's sitting on top of the dresser. She realized what happened. The ice in the bucket next to her melted and the cans of soda fell down the ice. That's what made the noise. And then it made it again, and we all began laughing. We all began laughing at how ignorant we all were. Yes, we're enemies. I'm black, he's the head of the Klan. But we were in the same motel room, sitting at the same table, talking, at some points laughing, at some points agreeing, at other points disagreeing, but we were not getting violent and angry or anything like that, okay? But this was, I'll say this was a teaching moment. I won't say it was a learning moment. It was a teaching moment. The lesson taught was this: all because some foreign, and underscore or circle the word foreign, entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice and cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful and accusatory of each other. The lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. Ignorance breeds fear. If you do not keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will breed hatred, because we hate those things that frighten us. If you do not keep that hatred in check, that hatred in turn will breed destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just simply ignorant. So we saw the whole chain almost unravel to completion. Completion would have been the destruction had the Nighthawk drawn his gun and shot somebody, namely me or my secretary, or had I pounced across the table and hurt one of them. So fortunately it stopped just short of that. But ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. So like I said, we carried on with my conversation and our interview, and we ignored the noise and just finished our thing. At the end, I thanked him very much for his time. I shook his hand, shook the Nighthawk's hand. He wished me luck. He even gave me his Klan card, and he said, "Keep in touch." And I was thinking to myself, what? I didn't come here to make friends with the Klan. I just came here to find out, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? But I said, I didn't say that to him, but I said, "Mr. Kelly, I appreciate your time. I'll give you a call when my book is ready for publication. I have other Klan people I want to interview around the country." And he wished me luck again, and he and the Nighthawk left. On my way back down the highway to my house, I said to Mary, I said, I rather like Roger Kelly. She like just jumped almost in the car, hit her head on the ceiling. She said, "Well, he doesn't like you." I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "I like him, but I don't like what he stands for. However, I am going to keep in contact with him. I think we have more in common than we do in contrast. Most of what we had in contrast centered around how we each feel about race. He felt his race is superior to my race. I feel my race is equal to his race. He felt the races had to be apart. I felt they could be together. Other than that, we agreed on a lot of things. So, I would call him. I would call him when I had to play a gig up in Frederick, Maryland, or that county. Say, "Hey, man, I'm playing, wherever. Come on out." He'd come. He'd bring the Nighthawk, and and they would stand around and watch me play, or they'd get out on the dance floor and dance, carry on. They didn't come in their robes and hoods, right? They just came in regular clothes. So, this went on for a while. I would invite him down to my house. Now, like I said, I live almost an hour and a half from him, hour and 20 minutes. He'd come down to my house, and he'd bring the Nighthawk. And the Nighthawk would sit on my couch next to him. Sometimes the Nighthawk would get bored and pull out his gun and just like twirl it on his finger while Mr. Kelly and I are talking. And sometimes I would invite over some of my Jewish friends, some of my black friends, some of my white friends, just different people who had different perspectives. Because I did not want him to think that I was some kind of exception. I want him to talk to other people as well. I wasn't trying to convert him. I was just trying to show him just different things. Now, here's a man who did not like me, who felt that he was superior to me, but yet he would sit at my dining room table and eat with me. Or we would go out and have lunch or dinner. So this went on for a couple of years. He never invited me to his house. If I had to run an errand up in his county, I'd call him and say, hey man, what are you doing? If he said nothing, I'd say, well, come run this errand with me. I need to drop off a music contract for a gig at such and such a bar or whatever. He'd say, okay, I'll meet you wherever. He didn't want me to come to his house to get him. He'd meet me at this park and ride. I'd go to the park and ride. He'd be there waiting for me. The Nighthawk would get in my back seat. Mr. Kelly would get in my front seat. And we'd ride around Frederick County and do what I had to do. So this went on for a couple of years. By the end of a couple of years, he was coming down to my house by himself. No Nighthawk. He trusted me that much. All right? And shortly thereafter, he got promoted from Grand Dragon, state leader, or what we call governor, to imperial wizard, national leader, what we would call president. All right? He began inviting me to his house. I'd go to his house. I would see his Klan den, where he would have his Klan meetings, things like that. I picked some more notes from my book. Then he began inviting me to Klan rallies. I'd go to these Klan rallies, and they'd be all these Klansmen and Klanswomen in robes and hoods, and they'd have these, you'll be in the evening, they'd have these torches, the fire on the torch, and they would parade around this big 20, 30-foot cross. It's two wooden beams put together, and they're wrapped in burlap, and the burlap has been soaked in what they call Klan cologne, which is actually diesel fuel or kerosene. And so they parade around in a circle around the cross, and then the imperial wizard or the Grand Dragon will say, Klansmen, halt, and they all halt. Then you say, for God, for race, for country. And then you say, Klansmen, approach the cross, and they all close the circle in to the base of the cross. You say, Klansmen, light the cross. And they throw their torches down at the foot of the cross, and all of a sudden, whoosh, the fire would just shoot up. And you have this flaming cross. And then they give some speeches, this, that, and the other. So I take some pictures, take some more notes, etc. Well, CNN got wind of this black man and this Klan leader, at these rallies, and they thought this makes an interesting story. So they wanted to do a report on it. And they contacted me and asked me would I be willing to do that, to do an interview with them. I said, sure. So they asked me, when's the next time you're going to a rally? I said, well, when I get invited, I'll let you know. So I got invited, and I called CNN and said the rally's going to be on Saturday, whatever the date was. They said, okay, are you performing anywhere Friday night? I said, yeah. And they came to my gig. They filmed my band and I doing what I normally do, which is play music. And then Saturday morning, CNN came to my house. And they followed me 2 hours up the road to this Klan rally. And they said, do you think Roger Kelly will even talk to us? I said, I'll do better than that. When the rally is over, I will get Roger Kelly to come back to my house, and you can interview the head of the Ku Klux Klan, the imperial wizard, inside a black man's house. I said, oh, okay. So they filmed the whole rally. And when the rally was over, I spoke with Mr. Kelly and told him what was going on. Excuse me. And he agreed to come back to my house. He drove 2 hours out of his way by himself, no Nighthawk, to my house. He sat in my basement and interviewed with CNN. And this clip was shown on CNN every hour, CNN and HLN, which they called headline news back then, every hour for 24 hours all over the world. And I'm going to show it to you right now. And I want you to pay particular attention to what Mr. Kelly says. He says that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan. because his views on the Klan had been cemented in his mind for years. And then he went on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. So I want you to listen to what he says, and then he says something else at the end of the clip. Listen to what he says at the end of the clip as well, and then listen to the little short commentary that the two CNN news anchor desk people have to make.
This is CNN.
Welcome to this final hour of CNN Sunday Morning. I'm Bob Kane, and today for Miles O'Brien.
Good morning to you all. I'm Joey Chud.
Friendship can transcend all kinds of boundaries.
Just look at us. And two men in Washington area are showing that even an African-American man and a member of the Ku Klux Klan can find common ground. CNN's Carl Rochelle reports.
Daryl Davis plays a hot piano. It's part of the show, and it makes him stand out. He also stands out here. Davis is one of the few African Americans you will ever find attending a KKK rally. More than attending, he is welcome.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white niggers out there.
It's been a tough day for the Klan. Their Maryland rally found many local residents rejecting the message of white separatism. After it's over, Daryl Davis hangs around backstage with his friend, Klan wizard Roger Kelly. It's not unusual for blacks and whites to be friends, but it is unusual to find a black man and a Klan leader chatting pleasantly over an orange soda after a Klan rally. The relationship started over a book Davis was writing. His secretary set up an interview with Roger Kelly, but didn't tell him Davis was black. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another and we do different things, it hasn't changed my views about the Klan, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
Kelly and his Klan friends go to hear Davis and his band. And Davis goes to their rallies.
I sat on the front row and listened to each Klansman speak. Some things I agreed with, other things I did not agree with.
Davis thinks that his presence promotes badly needed understanding.
Hate stems, I believe, from fear of the unknown, and I think this is all across the board, regardless of whether it's a Klansman or anything else.
But he has no illusions about the Klan. If he did, his friend would be quick to disabuse them.
And I believe in separation of the races. I believe that's in the best interest of all races.
Does he really? Or has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
I will follow that man to hell and back, because I believe in what he stands for and he believes in what I stand for. A lot of times we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. In Washington, I'm Carl Rochelle, CNN Sunday Morning.
Strange. Good adjective, strange.
Certainly that.
Okay, so that was the clip. Now you heard Mr. Kelly. You heard Mr. Kelly say that that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan were what? Cemented in his mind for years. And then he goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. But towards the end of that clip, there was another teaching moment. He didn't even realize it. But did you hear him say, the imperial wizard, the head of the Klan, say that he respected me? I'm his enemy. He said, we may not agree on everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me, and I respect him to sit down and listen to him. Those are his words. Very, very powerful and important words. And if you don't take anything else home tonight from me, take that home, okay? Because you can apply that in any adversarial situation. It doesn't have to be about race. Let's take race off the table. There are plenty of hot topics around today, right? Abortion, nuclear weapons, global warming, the environment, the current presidency administration. You're on one side, somebody else is on the other side, okay? Give your adversary a platform. Allow them to air their views. If you agree with them, fine, no problem. If you don't agree with them, that's fine too. You challenge them, but you don't challenge them violently or rudely. You say, look, I need more clarification, more explanation as to why you think I should believe that way. And then they'll start talking some more. When you do things like that, chances are they will reciprocate and give you a platform. You make sure you have done your homework so you have all your facts together so that you can present your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. Because at the end of the day, you each have to think about what the other person said. If somebody says something to you that goes against what you have believed from day one to however old you may be today, but you think, she does have a point there, you're going to begin to shift in that direction. Because nobody wants to be wrong. We all want to be right. Right? You have people who are ignorant, you have people who are stupid. And some people define ignorance and stupidity as being synonymous. I do not. To me, an ignorant person is someone who makes the wrong decision or makes a bad choice because he or she does not have the facts or the proper information to make the right choice. You give that person the facts, the proper information, then they can make the right choice, and you have eradicated their ignorance. A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the right information, and they still make the wrong choice. So, for example, if I have a room, small room or whatever, and I paint all the walls are wet, I don't post any signs that say, wet paint, stay off the walls. Anybody walking into that room is ignorant to the fact that the walls are wet. And they might come along and, lean up against the wall and get paint on their clothes. So, how do I fix that? I cure that ignorance by putting up signs that say, stay off the walls, wet paint. I can stand in the doorway, tell each person entering the room, hey, gather around the center, don't touch the walls are wet, I just painted them 10 minutes ago. So now everyone coming into that room has the facts. Everyone coming into that room has the proper information to make the right choice and make a good decision. But yet, somebody still goes and leans up against the wall, and now he wants to know why he has paint on his clothes. It's because he's stupid, okay? He had the information, he had the facts. Fortunately, folks, there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. Unfortunately, there's no cure for stupidity. Okay, if you give someone the education and they choose not to use it, there's nothing you can do until they employ it. So, Mr. Kelly and I would continue our conversations even after my book came out. I'd call and we'd meet for dinner, go out, whatever. Sometimes we talk about the Klan, sometimes we talk about other things, etc. Now understand something. I'm not a racist. I'm not a supremacist or separatist, anything like that. Okay, that's what he was. I did not respect what Mr. Kelly had to say. I respected his right to say it. I know you all understand the difference. Okay? So that's the respect that we had for each other. He could say what he wanted to say, I could say what I wanted to say. And the conversations would grow from there. Over time, that cement that he talked about that held his ideas together in his mind began to get cracks in it. He began questioning some of his thinking based upon the conversations that he had with me. And then over more time, that cement crumbled and fell apart. And then a few years back, guess what? Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan. And when Roger Kelly quit the Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. This is the robe of the Imperial Wizard, the same one that you saw him wearing in the video clip. And of course, this is what they call the hood or the helmet. This part here is the hood or the helmet. This is the mask. Members who want anonymity, they don't want you to know who they are, they wear the mask and they peep at you through these eyelets so they can see you, you can't see them. If they don't care that you know who they are, the mask has 3 snaps and some Velcro. Just unsnap the mask, pull it off, and the face is exposed under the hood or helmet. And you saw both types in that video, some with their faces covered, some with their faces exposed. Now, our world is, all of this came through conversation, through talking, through freedom of speech, learning how to communicate with one another. You don't have to agree with somebody to talk with them. All right? What did I say I majored in? Music. I'm not a psychologist or sociologist. Maybe I should have been. I'd probably make more money doing that than playing piano. But but I enjoy music too much. I'm just a rock and roll piano player, folks. If I can do that and walk away with things like this, and I've got a ton of these at home. I've got all kinds of Klan robes and other stuff that have been given to me by active members once we became friends and they left the organization, just through conversation, through talking, all right, speech. As our society is rapidly changing, we come from a background where we protect our own. We self-segregate, and that may have worked for a while, but in this day and age, it can't work anymore. For example, if I'm walking down the street and there's a black guy and a white guy up ahead on the sidewalk, and I don't know either of them, but they're arguing back and forth and trading insults. One calling the one stupid, or one calling the, white guy calls the black guy stupid, black guy calls the white guy an idiot. I don't know either one of them. But as I walk by, I hear the white guy call the black guy stupid. Am I going to turn around and get involved? Probably not. I mean, maybe the black guy is stupid. I don't know. So, but I know it has nothing to do with me. It's between these two. So I continue on. But same thing. I'm walking down and I see these two guys arguing, and the white guy, as I pass, the white guy calls the black guy a nigger. Well, guess what? I'm coming back. Because now I need to know what's going on. It's no longer between the two of them. That word is pretty broad. It includes me. So I'm going to come back and find out what's going on. It doesn't matter to me whether the black guy was right or wrong. You have insulted me now. So now you've invited me into your little situation. So now you have to deal with me. So that's the way we used to be. And that's the way many of us still are. We will defend our own. All right? So now, same scenario. Let's say a black guy and a Jewish guy are on the sidewalk. I don't know them. I'm walking by. All right? And the black guy uses some anti-Semitic slur against this Jewish fellow. I walk on by. I'm not Jewish. Do I care that he insulted some Jewish guy? That may have been the way a lot of people behave. But no, today we need to stop that. I need to come back and say, hey, whoa. It doesn't matter what that Jewish person did. You don't insult a whole religion or a whole ethnicity or a whole race of people. If you've got a problem with an individual, then deal with that problem with that individual. Don't include, the individual's family and his whole religion and this, that, and the other. I need to come back and voice my disagreement with this discrimination. So we all need to do that. We all need to put out a universal message that we will not tolerate any kind of discrimination, even if it's against someone that does not belong to our group. Okay? Today, 2017, females are still making 79 cents on the man's dollar for the same amount of work. We need to stand up and say, hey, we can't say, well, that's their problem. As long as I get my dollar, I'm cool. No, we got to stand up for them. Because once, you put out that universal message, even if you're young, you don't tolerate discrimination against the elderly. Even if you're fine and fit, you don't tolerate discrimination against the handicapped or the challenged or what have you. Okay? We put out a universal message that we're not going to tolerate any form of discrimination. Then you will see things changing. Because folks, this is the 21st century. We are living in space-age times, but there are still too many of us still thinking with Stone Age minds. And we can change that. It bothers me, and don't get me wrong, I am patriotic, I love my country, but it bothers me when I hear people say, we're the greatest country on the face of this earth, blah, blah, blah. Perhaps, technologically, we are the greatest. We put a man on the moon. We were the first to do that. We invented that technology. And while Neil Armstrong is up there walking around on the moon, talking about one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, we can talk to him live, all the way from Earth to the moon, via satellite radio phone. We invented that technology, nobody else. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Everybody in here has email. Hit a few words, hit a few numbers, hit send, and you're talking to people right next door in New Jersey or in California, Australia, Africa, China, wherever you want to talk. We invented that technology. So how is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of this earth, but yet too many of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door because he or she is a different color, a different religion, a different persuasion? It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest nation on the face of this earth, our ideology needs to catch up to our technology. And once we get them both up there, then we can truly brag about how great we are. So I'm going to conclude my speech now and just take some questions here. But just remember what Mr. Kelly said. Like I said, he said that he may not agree with everything, but at least I respected him to sit down and listen to him, and he respected me to sit down and listen to me. That's the key word, folks. Respect. You may not have to agree, but sit down and listen and talk with one another. Now, the two CNN anchor people at the end of that clip, they implied that I was strange. Well, well, I'll tell you what. If being strange gets people to give up stuff like this, we all need to be strange. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, any questions? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Thank you so much for that. That was beyond epic. Wow. Sorry, what was the fate of Mr. Kelly today? Like, where is he today? Is he alive?
Yeah, he's alive, and he's out of the Klan. He used to go around and give speeches with me and things like that, but that stigma follows him around. And so unfortunately, even though he's renounced all that stuff, he gets jobs, and he has to work to pay his mortgage and whatever else. People find out, oh, that's the Klan leader. All of a sudden the job finds a way to fire him and get rid of him. So he's going from job to job to job. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was a really great speech for one. I was wondering, before you published the book and before you were on CNN, what were the reactions of people that you told about this in your everyday life? Were there people who were like, you shouldn't be doing this at all, this is dangerous, or once you explained to them, did people really understand your point of view and how it was going?
I got all of the above. My friends my friends already knew that I was crazy, so they accepted me. But yeah, there are people who tried to discourage me from doing what I was doing out of fear for my safety, or Daryl, that's never going to work. They're never going to talk to you. Why are you wasting your time with ignorant people and all that? I hear it all, and even today, there's still people who some people even get angry with me about that because they don't understand. But if they have taken the time to read my book, or they've seen me interviewed or read an interview in a magazine or seen my documentary or something like that, then they understand. But sometimes just the visceral reaction of seeing a black man shaking hands with a Klan leader, can put some people over the edge.
Good evening, Mr. David and everyone.
Call me Daryl, thank you.
I'll be straight up like this. I'm from Nigeria, Africa. I came to the USA a year ago, something. If I came down here, I never understood the word races or race or something. But unfortunately, when I got here, I started understanding the word race and the other accent and stuff like that. So a couple of days ago, I was watching Facebook and I saw the KKK rally.
Yeah.
So, and I understand that you got great courage. I respect your courage a lot. And I understand that from what you said, the time you had a meeting with the KK leader was way a long time ago, right? And it's kind of
no, I meet with KK leaders even today. Still, I travel around the country. It still goes on.
So it still kind of like worries me that KKK is still out there. But my question is, you've been opportune to meet them, to mingle with them, to know them one-on-one. Do you think KKK is going to be there like forever, or what do you think? How long do you think?
Okay, I think what's happening is this. There are many different Klan groups around the country. And believe it, there used to be one Klan group, the Ku Klux Klan, and chapters of that one group spread out around the country, like the Boy Scouts of America, or the Red Cross, or the NAACP, or perhaps maybe even FIRE, right? You have different chapters elsewhere, but you have the central headquarters. But now there's no more the Ku Klux Klan. There are all these autonomous groups. They all have the same beliefs, same bylaws, the same colors on their robes. Everything's the same, but they're rivals with each other. What's happening is they are revving up right now because this is their last ditch effort. They feel that this is a white man's country, and anybody who is non-white needs to get out, go elsewhere. Those are the white supremacists. Then you have some Klan who are not white supremacists so much. They are what you call white separatists. The white separatists believe that the Jews, the blacks, the Hispanics, the Asians, they can stay here in this country because they're already here, but they need to be separate from us. They need to have their own schools, their own workplaces, their own neighborhoods, and we don't cross. All right? So because in 2008 we had a black president and the increase in illegal immigration, they see what they consider their world changing drastically. And they predict, and they're very accurate at predicting this. They say by 2042, if they don't do anything, it's going to be 50-50, white and non-white, and that is true. Okay, and shortly thereafter, white people will be a minority in this country. Okay, and globally, whites are a minority, but nationally here, they are the majority. But they see this happening, and then soon it's going to be like that. And when you have sat on the throne of power for so long, you don't want to get off. So they don't want to give up that seat of power. So that's why you're seeing an uptick in seeing them have these rallies and that the other. But no, they will not be around forever. They'll be around for a while. Now, of course, there will be those who will never give up. They will go to their grave being hateful and violent. There will always be those people. But I would say the majority of them will eventually tamp down and change over time. Yes, sir. Oh, sir. Didn't mean to make you run there, Molly.
Thank you again, Mr. Davis, for sharing.
Thank you. Call me Daryl because you make me feel old.
So I really appreciated your unique definition of what ignorance is. My question is, in an area of strong institutionalized racism, how can white and privileged members of society stand up to bigotry and call for change while acknowledging their own personal ignorance?
Okay, good question. You know, people sometimes self-segregate, and it doesn't mean that they are racist. It's a natural thing to feel more comfortable around someone with whom you share a commonality. You know, that you look like, or that you speak the same language, or you're interested in the same activity, whatever. Because, you know, like, let's take Philadelphia, major city, right, metropolis, just like Washington, D.C., right near where I live, or Chicago, or wherever, Baltimore. You see these people who work, let's say, in that building over there, and you have all different kinds of ethnicities in there. And they may even work together on the same project, all right? They may even share a cubicle together. But then at 12 noon, where do they go? They go downstairs to the cafeteria, and guess what? The blacks sit with the blacks, the Hispanics sit with the Hispanics, the Asians sit with the Asians. Does that mean that they're racist? No, not necessarily. They just feel more comfortable around similar cultures. And what you do is make the effort to walk across the cafeteria and sit with someone else. Just do that, because you will learn something. You have something to teach, and you have something to learn. And it's that sharing that makes the puzzle come together. Everybody is a separate jigsaw puzzle piece, all with a unique shape and unique cut. And the puzzle is not beautiful until those pieces link together. So take it upon, you know, if nobody's come to sit with you, take it upon yourself one day just to get up from your normal table and walk across the cafeteria and sit with someone with whom you've never sat before. I guarantee you, you will find, if you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you will find that you have something in common. If you spend 10 minutes, you'll find even more. And I have this theory that while you are actively learning about someone else, at the same time, you are passively teaching them about yourself. So while you're engaging somebody, they're learning about you too. And not to say that everybody is enemies, but you know, if you find somebody with opposing points of view, don't discount them, don't ignore them, don't shun them. Sit down and talk with them, okay? Because you know what? When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They might be yelling and screaming and disagreeing and beating their fists on the table to drive home a point, but they're talking. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you want to keep the conversation going. So yes, white privilege gives you a lot of things that you would otherwise not be aware of. You know, I can talk to discrimination with an Asian or somebody Jewish or somebody Hispanic, you know, but and they could relate to me. You know, they don't have to be black because, you know, we might share that commonality. But those are things that in this country that you might not see. And you know, and people are different. People are different because back in the 50s and stuff, a lot of black people, especially artists, moved to France. Because even though the white people in France were just as white, if not whiter, if you will, if that's such a word, because you know they didn't mix with slaves and all that kind of stuff, right? They moved over there because they were treated as equals by those white people, where they were not treated as equals by their own white people in their own country. All right? So, you know, you have that history. But take the time to step out of that privilege and walk across the cafeteria and sit at another table. Anyone else?
Daryl, again, just to thank you for coming and sharing your compelling story.
Thank you.
So I think that your story speaks to a central tenet of free speech in a liberal democracy, which is that speech is the medium with which we can communicate and attempt to convince others of our viewpoint. So your meetings with KKK leaders, are you utilizing free speech in an attempt to right a belief that you think is wrong, that is wrong? What about instances where that speech is not enough to convince someone who advances and espouses hateful or violent speech? So for example, what if we can't convince Richard Spencer that we shouldn't engage in genocide of black people? At what point is it okay, if ever, to respond with violence to someone who is espousing violent speech?
I don't think it's ever okay just to initiate violence unless, you know, your safety and your life is threatened. I mean, I've had to put people in the hospital and put people in jail when I've been attacked because I felt, you know, that they were going to take me out. And so I fought back and I hurt people, you know, and it's not something, you know, that I wanted to do, but it was a survival thing. So, you know, in cases like that, you know, obviously, you know, you're going to engage in violence if violence is perpetrated upon you, and it's a matter of your survival. But just because somebody is talking violent about you and telling you, what they think, you know, should be done with you and things like that, no, there's no cause for that kind of thing. And you know, you just let them talk. You know, like I said, you know, there will be those who will go to their graves being hateful and violent. I think over time, Richard Spencer, he's flying high right now because he's the new poster child, but he's quickly getting knocked down. I know his mentor. His mentor is a guy named Jared Taylor, and I've been to Jared Taylor's house, and I know Jared Taylor very well. But and now they've had a falling out, the two of them, because you know when you propagate hate, it comes back and bites you in the butt. It will. You know, it comes full circle. So, you know, Richard Spencer will get his eventually. But I think he's one who will change. I know some others who I know will never change. I don't see any hope for them. But just, you know, let them talk, let them do their thing, and hate will just eat them up alive. Now, speaking about Richard Spencer, this whole thing, the Klan, neo-Nazi, whatever, it was first called white supremacy, and the people were called white supremacists, all right? It became so violent with lynchings, church bombings, synagogue bombings, dragging people behind pickup trucks, and all that kind of stuff, that even white people who belonged to the Klan said, whoa, I don't like black people and I don't like Jews, but you know what? I don't want to be killing anybody, you know, and they began dropping out. Either for ethical reasons or they didn't want to go to jail if they got caught, right? So membership began dropping. And so the Klan needed to rebuild. The term white supremacy or white supremacist became non-palatable. So they changed the term to white separatist and said, you know, we don't hate black people, we just love ourselves. You know, that kind of thing. You know, they can have their own schools and da-da-da-da. So those white people who dropped out or ones who were on the fence, I like that idea. I don't have to deal with them. Yeah, I'll join the Klan or whatever. So they joined. But guess what? It was the same old thing. The violence would start again. So now the white separatists, you know, who were not of a violent mindset began dropping out, and the numbers go down. So now the term white supremacy and white separatists are not palatable. So they changed the name, and they changed the name to white nationalist. But the neo-Nazis here mostly use that term. So now every time there's a neo-Nazi march or something like that, violence breaks out. So people drop out of that too. So here comes Richard Spencer. He's got a new name, the alt-right. But you know, you can call it whatever you want to call it. And to quote that cliche, a rose by any other name is still a rose. So alt-right, white nationalists, white separatists, white supremacists, it's all the same thing. The day that the Holocaust Museum opened up in Washington, D.C., I was there. And I went down there for two reasons. I knew a lot of black supremacists and a lot of white supremacists would be there to protest. And I wanted to see the opening anyway. But I was still writing my book, so I wanted to interview some of these people. And right across from the museum were 3 bullpens that had been fenced off areas. One was for black supremacists and black separatists. One was for white supremacists. The other one was a group that I never even heard of, and I didn't really understand. It was called Jews Against the Holocaust. So these were Jews protesting the opening of this Holocaust museum. So, and they were like separated by streets. This block, that block, that block. So I went down there, and I recognized some of the white supremacists behind the fence, and they had like a ring of police around them, and they're all jeering and making all kinds of noise and stuff. I recognized a couple of them, so I went over to the fence, and I called one of them over, and he and I were talking across the fence, and he invited me into the bullpen. So I walk around, and the cops didn't want to let me in. They thought, all hell's going to break loose. Black guy inside this thing. But he said, no, let him in. So either let me, or they had to let me in. They're standing there with their mouths hanging open, like watching me. So I'm talking to this guy, and then all these other white supremacists start coming over and talking with me, including one of the guys who was responsible for that bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church down in in Alabama, that took the lives of the 4 little black girls. I'm standing there talking to him, right? And as I'm talking to these people, several of them walk by and slap me on the back. Hey man, how you doing? They don't know me, but they're like patting me on the back and welcome me into the bullpen. I'm thinking, what on earth? Why are these people being so friendly to me and patting me on my back? And then I realized what it was. You see, black supremacists and white supremacists, they get along because they have the same ideology. They each want to keep their race pure and separate. All right? So these guys who were slapping me on the back, they thought I came over from the black supremacy bullpen to say hello. All right? And so one of them, in fact, it was the Grand Dragon of New York, the state leader of New York. His name was Bill Hoff. He comes up, he pats me on the back and starts talking to me, and he asked me if I knew Dr. Brock. Dr. Brock is a black supremacist, black separatist. I said, yeah, I know him. And I'd seen Dr. Brock over at the black bullpen. And so he didn't know Dr. Brock personally, he knew of him, and he admired his ideology, which was the same as his, except one black, one white. And he wanted to meet Dr. Brock and asked me if I would introduce him. So I took this Grand Dragon over to the black supremacy bullpen. But it's crazy stuff. But it all comes with communication. And then when people talk to one another, like I say, you find out how much you have in common, how much you don't. But you learn things, and it helps to change that ideology. It curbs the violence when you talk to one another, regardless of what the views are. So here's a man that I was told would kill me. Here's a man that he told me himself he didn't like me. And then we went on to become some of the best of friends. And here's the proof, he quit. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.